What is going on, Golf fans? It's your boy, Gsluke, here with our DFS and betting live stream for this week's Players Championship. Going to get you guys ready for all of your exposure with any of your last-second questions that you have before lock, as well as look at the weather report, some of the strategy out there for your lineups, as well as any underdog and prize picks questions that you have out there for round one as well. But hopefully you're having a fantastic Wednesday wherever you are. We had more than a couple sawgrass splashes out on the golf course, so if I seem like I'm a little bit, couple 3 or 4 drinks in, well, you guys know why. We are enjoying ourselves out here on vacation. Already have a lot of our lineups and exposure accounted for. So hey, gonna get some dinner after this, get some sleep, and then get out there for rounds 1 through 4. But gonna make sure you guys have all those questions answered here in this stream. You got Jake down there who was there early. Love to see the sweaty tryhards getting down there early. Also got Go Collect down there as well. Also Michael, who I appreciate the kind words when it comes to that. Appreciate that as well. Dave, also MN Holla down there. We got Brant, also Brass down there as well. Any questions I'll touch on just here in a little bit, but let's give a little bit of a synopsis of what I saw out there today, as well as some of these course conditions. So in terms of what I saw out there for today, it looked like your regular old TPC Sawgrass, regular old Players Championship, I would say. Relatively soft greens, which has really been a theme the last 2 or 3 years. They've had the reign of the week of the golf tournament the last, I'd say even 5-6 years, really, if we look past the last 4 or 5 years. Now, the wind could obviously make things a little bit more difficult, but I'm expecting pretty similar conditions to the last few times out. So last year, right, I played under par for 3 of the 4 rounds. The year before that, it also played relatively easy. I can see a few rounds, I'd say especially round 2, where it got a little bit harder, but relatively easy conditions there in 2023. And then back in 2022, you had a wide spread of conditions. It was easy for 3 of the 4 rounds. Of course, when the wind kicked up over there for Friday is where you saw that massive split with conditions. But considering that the weather looks relatively calm out there for rounds 1 and 2, I think you're going to see some low scoring out there. So, something around half a stroke, maybe a stroke under par for the scoring averages is what I expect over there for Thursday, Friday. Now, I have the HRRR forecast over here for tomorrow. You'll see that in the morning, it looks relatively calm the entire time. Now, a little bit cooler towards the beginning of the day, which could make for a little bit of tough start out there for some players, but I would say the morning would be easier than the afternoon in general. Then if we go over here to Friday, we'll take a look at a few of the different models over here Friday. HRRR for Thursday should be pretty accurate, but over here on the Friday side, it looks pretty much the same. Now, this HRRR model isn't completely loaded in, but you can see as the day goes on, it does get slightly windier when it comes to those sustained winds. But if we bring up some of the other models that we have on here, you're going to see that the winds are steadily getting stronger as the day goes on. So that is pretty much commonplace in every model out there from Thursday to Friday. So I don't see there being a massive advantage out there in either direction, right? You've heard that trend on Twitter all week, I'm sure, of guys starting on one side of the draw, always getting the job done. A lot of that can be variance, especially over a small sample size like that. And it can also do with the tee times, right? They always put the strongest players on that side of the draw, or at least typically put them on that side of the draw, which could be a reason why 14 or whatever it is of the last 16 guys started on the AM PM wave. It's not really something that I'm looking at this week, because when you take a look at these forecasts, we bring it up over here on the compare tab. Thursday maybe kicks up a little bit as the day goes on, but pretty flat, I would say, for most of those forecasts. Over here on the Friday side, it's the same thing, right? Like 1, maybe 2 of the models having it kicking up over there in the PM wave, but pretty much ideal conditions, I would say, over there for Thursday, Friday, regardless of the weather model that we're looking at. So I would expect pretty much spot in line conditions with what we had last year, which were under par for 3 of the 4 rounds. So, something around like 0.46 under, maybe it's closer to this like 0.89 strokes under par scoring average that we ended up getting out there for Sunday. But something in that range is what I'm looking forward to over there for tomorrow, which is important to know, right? Over there for our DFS lineups, kind of get a gauge over there on our conditions. And especially when we get to the prop side here in a little bit. So prop side will be towards the end of this live stream. These are some of the averages that we'll go through later. But before we do so, we're going to focus on the DFS side of things. But first off, I'll look at some of the ownership as well as any player deep dives that you want. And I did see quite a bit out there on the golf course. I'll mention some of the conditions that we saw out there as well. The one thing I'll say about this golf course is, though the rough is at least what I'm used to, I think it looks the exact same as what we've seen the last few years. golf course is pretty receptive, like what we're used to as well. But the around the green shots were really giving these players some trouble. If you guys saw that Patrick Fishburne clip that I posted on my Twitter, he ended up flubbing a chip about 5 yards in front of him. But he also had players that were hitting the ball 10, sometimes 15 feet by the hole, out of some of that around the green rough. And in general, the rough is about maybe 3.5 inches long, I'd say, for a majority of the golf course. At least in the driving areas, it's probably 3.5 inches long. Around the green, though, especially like holes 18, there are a few holes in particular where the rough is maybe a little bit beefier. It's closer to 4.5 inches. And you saw guys like Victor Hovland today, I mentioned this over there on my Twitter, who literally chipped the ball. It wasn't even a hard chip. He was maybe like 5 yards off the green. He chipped it, and it was maybe 50, 60 foot wide green. So he had quite a bit of room to work with, right? It was a pretty thick green. He hit it through the green and into the bunker over the green. So I would say that the main thing I maybe noticed about the golf course setup this year is you had the different tee box at 6, of course, right? That's been well documented. You also had the fact that some of the par 5s were lengthened, but I'd say that around the green shots, because of the rough was growing out a little bit, might be a little bit harder here in 2025. So just a little bit more emphasis, I'd say, over there on that second shot and over there with your shots gained approach, which is always something that I'm really prioritizing over there in my modeling. This week, no different. It was towards the top out there in every custom model that I ran. So it's not like I really have to adjust all that much with what I was looking for in players. But I'd say guys like Scotty, right, your elite tier players towards the top end of that approach list, maybe getting an even bigger boost here in 2025, just because around the green rough is a lot more substantial than what you have there in the fairway. So, when we see the GCSA sheet, the greenskeeper sheet, and they tell us about the length of the rough, right? That's an average of the entire golf course. And, what you'll notice over here at TPC Sawgrass, right? They could mow it overnight, right? For all we know, the around the green rough could, go away over there before tomorrow. But as of right now, it gets longer the closer that you are to the hole, which, as I said, that's going to put some extra emphasis over there on the iron play. Let me stop streaming here. Let's go over here to our DFS tab now. Now's the time for any of your specific player questions. And before we talk about all those specific questions and players, I am going to give you guys a little synopsis of what I saw out there today. So I'm actually going to bring up my phone. We're going to go through some of the tweets that I was putting out there today, because I don't want to say that everything I saw today I went out there and tweeted, but it was pretty much a stream of consciousness. Like everything that I saw out there that I thought would be valuable out there to a DFS player, I wanted to go out there and tweet out to you guys. So if we go back to this, I'm able to actually go back and retrace, right, a lot of what I saw today. I can relay what I saw with some of these players. So this is going to be the synopsis section of what I saw out there on the golf course. And, take this with a grain of salt, right? I only saw, a very small portion of all these players out there today. I didn't follow anyone for more than maybe a hole or two when it came to them actually playing the golf course. But things that I noticed, I definitely wanted to point out. So first thing I would say is that Cam Young was getting putting tips from Denny McCarthy. So if you're a fan of Denny McCarthy's putting, maybe it'll rub off on Cameron Young a little bit. The greens were extremely fast. I wanted to point that out right away. I noticed that with the first few putts that I saw getting hit. JT was really struggling on the greens. That is Justin Thomas, by the way, that I am talking about. Not so much a surprise there. Patrick Fishburne was getting eat up by the around the green play. That rough was really causing him some trouble. But here's where we got a range report that I posted. So Billy Horschel, he is a grinder. We know this, right? He's always working on his swing. He had a group of like 4 or 5 people around him. One was probably his coach. I know one was his caddy. He had a few other people around him as well, giving him feedback on pretty much every single swing. So, if you're somebody that likes a Billy Ho when he looks a little bit more comfortable, that was not the case out there for this golf tournament. Matt McNeely on the other end was extremely comfortable. It was him, his brother Scout out there on the bag. It's his caddy. That's also his brother that he has out there on the bag. And then he also had, I believe it was, I forget his first name, but Hamilton, the coach, over there helping him with some stuff. But it was hardly any dialogue between the coach and the player. He looked very comfortable out there and really looked at home, I'd say, over there on that range. Brian Harmon was working on his irons quite a bit, but every swing that I saw looked well under control. His coach was giving him some feedback, but I don't necessarily think that was a negative. Hayden Springer was only hitting his woods and drivers, so I think he's likely working on that portion of his game. I also saw Thomas Dietrich out there quite a bit as well. He was club twirling almost every single shot, so I would say Thomas Dietrich was hitting the ball well. And then Tom Kim, this is a negative out there, and I love Tom Kim. You guys know that, by the way. He 3-putt on the putting green twice and it was only the 2 shots that I saw over there on the green. Now, they were like 40, 50 footers. He was putting pretty much the entire length of the putting green over there at TPC Sawgrass, but he was grinding on those comeback putts. He hit the first one, I think like 6-7 feet short, ended up missing it with a pull. The second one, he blew by like 8-9 feet. It wasn't like he was hitting on a practice green like most players, right? They walk up to their putt, they read it for maybe 1-2 seconds, they go out there and hit it. He was doing his entire process. I mean, grinding on it, sitting there asking his caddy, right, what he thought the putt was going to do, and then he missed both of them out there for a 3-putt. It was about 6-footer, then 8-footer out there on the next one. Again, I'm not condemning the guy. I think he could totally play well here. I think it's a short track out there for Tom Kim, but not really what you want to see from people. Frankie Safin was really hitting his driver well, so nothing I can say bad there. Goddard hits it a long way, but he was slicing it all over the range, so not really what I want to see out there from a lot of players. Akshay Bhatia was putting horribly, so if you're somebody that likes your guys putting well heading into the event, Akshay Bhatia was not doing that. Corey Connors also couldn't buy a putt for his life. He looked very frustrated over there on the putting greens. So just something I want to point out. I mentioned something about Dumpy Bo. I said he was working with his coach. I watched him a little bit longer than what I tweeted that out, and he was duck hooking some drives. So Dumpy Bo, if you're looking for some strong off the tee play, that was not there out there today. Sam Burns with his iron play looked absolutely magnificent. In fact, I watched him for a solid 10-15 minutes. He hit every single shot within balance, and I don't know what his target was, so I can't say if all of them were darts, but he looked very satisfied with all the shots that he was hitting. Jordan Spieth looked lost. I'll be the first one to admit it. You guys know I'm a huge Jordan Spieth fan. He sat there with his coach for 25 minutes, and I think I saw him hit like 2, maybe 3 golf shots. So it was a lot of yapping out there with his coach, and that doesn't scream confidence heading into tomorrow. I'll also say that I saw Max Homa out there was hitting a lot of golf balls. Not really the most reassuring thing, because he had the most balls of anyone out there, at least the most ball bags of anyone out there on the range. Ricky Fowler was putting, not much to say there. Shane Lowry was hitting some feel wedge shots, which is kind of a niche part of the game, which kind of tells me that he feels good about his full swing if he's going out there and going after some of those wacky, more creative shots. Victor Hovland, I already told you about that duffed chip shot. That was a huge problem for him. And maybe the biggest of all, the biggest piece of news that I saw out there, Scotty Scheffler was not practicing. And you may say that this isn't a big deal right out there for certain players, but everyone I saw was working on something. Literally every single guy that you had out there, hitting iron shots, working with the coach, putting. There was not one player that was dicking around other than Scotty Scheffler. And Scotty Scheffler, you know what he was doing? He was carrying his kid around out there on the driving range and showing him off out there to different players, going like, hey, I don't know if you've met my kid. And I don't know the kid's name, so I feel bad saying this, because I met his dad, by the way, on Sunday at the API. We didn't have a live stream since then, right? So I couldn't bring it up, but I got to meet Scott Scheffler out there on the golf course. By the way, class guy, right? Didn't have a massive conversation with him or anything, but just that's the kind of guy Scotty is. He's a family guy. Same thing with his dad. And that's all he was doing out there. So if you're somebody that likes your guys comfortable the day before the event starts, there was no one more comfortable than a Scotty Scheffler, I would say. You also had guys like Cam Davis really finding success on the greens. He was walking in almost all of his putts, so I would say that that's a good thing. Max McGreevy, he really hit the ball well today from what I could tell. He was one of the happier players that I could see on the range. You also had, I think I mentioned Cam Davis, right, walking in those putts. And then also Aldrich Potgieter. I didn't get to see a ton of his putting. That's where he was. He was on the putting green for all that I saw. But his speed on some longer putts, he was hitting some like 30 footers over there on the putting green, a little bit longer, right, than what most players are doing. He was hitting them to exact holding speed. I mean, I'm talking getting to the hole maybe like 6 inches by the whole kind of speed. He only made one of the 3 out there from 30 feet, but that's a pretty good hit rate. And like I said, if they didn't make it, he was getting damn close to going out there and making it. So that was the range report. That is what I saw today. Again, I wanted to remind myself out there with those tweets. Let's catch up on chat. We're going to talk through a little bit of ownership over there for this slate as well. So we're going to go through everyone that is 8K plus in terms of their ownership. And then, like I said, any deep dives that you want as well. So where did we leave off? So we had a question about any matchups. I haven't bet any myself, Brass, but if you want those, you might want to join the Patreon page because before tomorrow, I'm sure I'll have a few that I enter and that I post over there on the Discord page. What's going on, Nick? Welcome on in. Let's hear the course conditions. Rough, I'd say about the same as what we normally see. The new tree was pretty sweet, but the one thing I'll say about that, Ross, is that they're probably going to play the tee box up for at least the first few days. One of the 4 rounds, hell, maybe even 2-3 of the rounds, they might play it back. But if they play it from the back, it'll definitely come into play, that tree. And you said the pine straw? Yeah, dude, the pine straw is always there. It's annoying to walk through. It's fun to play off of, not fun out there as a fan. What's going on? James said, we'll be there Saturday at the tournament. If I see you, get you a drink for sure. Hey, I was going to buy you a drink, James, but if you want to buy me one, I'm not going to decline. What's going on, Anthony? Thoughts on Seabez and Denny as plays? Seabez, I'm at like a 5 out of 10. I really don't have any positive or negative things to say about him. He's a more positional player, right? So I guess he fits a TPC Sawgrass, but it's not like the form really stands out. So like I said, 5 out of 10. Nothing really great or terrible to say about him. But Denny McCarthy, I have a little bit more of a strong take about. His iron play has been fantastic over the last few months, especially over the last 12 rounds or so. He's been one of the better players over there in that 7K range. So I like Denny this week out of those two. Thoughts on Jake Knapp? So iron play also very strong with the Jake Knapp. I believe gaining over a half a stroke per round over there with his irons over his last 12 rounds. So if you're an irons truther like I am, somebody that looks for those ball strikers, I could see him filtering into a few GPP lineups. Probably not my favorite for like single entries, that sort of thing. But, GPPs, he'd make my sort of player pool. What's going on, Joseph? You need my slimy deep dives. Let me know when I'm ready. We'll have a few towards the end for sure, Nick. So stay tuned over the next few minutes. Ryan asked about Sahith Thagala in some Millie lineups. Seems like nobody's playing him. I would agree with that. Relatively low owned. And concerning form for sure. Agree with that, but not a good spot to miss fairways. So he's a high upside play, Ryan. You use him in GPPs. You wouldn't use him in a single entry. For sure, you wouldn't use him in a cash lineup. But if you have to get different to the field, let's say you're using some chalk like Fleetwood towards the top, some of the guys that are getting maybe 15, 20%, like a Sepp Straka, they're in the 8, 9K range, then it's a good way to get off of some of that ownership, right? You use those other players to kind of get different. And you can afford to take some guys that are a little bit higher owned. Top 3 fades for the week. So I guess I didn't like what I saw with Billy Ho, but this really is a good golf course for him. But based on what I saw, I guess I have to say that. Bo Hostler, I guess he's a fade because he could not hit that driver well today. And then I would say Jordan Spieth. I'm playing Jordan Spieth though, right? So I can't really call him a fade. But if you're not somebody that's a Jordan Spieth fan, what I saw with Jordan today was not favorable whatsoever. So yeah, probably those 3 right there. What's going on? Sean says, hey, Luke, what do I think about the Højgaard brothers this week? And do I think they make the cut? I think they both have a really good chance to. I'm higher on them than most out there on tour. I like Nico just a little bit more than Rasmus, though, because the iron play has been better out there for Nikolai. From what they showed of Scotty on the Live at the Players, he was getting pissed putting. Yeah, I didn't get to see him putting a whole bunch, but he wasn't doing that much practicing out there, so who knows? And getting pissed off putting kind of sounds like Scotty Scheffler. TPC, Lee, Woodland, and Hoffman is your deep dives for me tonight. So yeah, TPC Lee, I don't know if he's my favorite play. Like he's like about the most average play that you could possibly think of. Just like as a general with the play, I'd probably put him at like a 2 or 3 out of 10. For a super cheap play, maybe like a 4 or a 5 out of 10. Like he'd be an average guy down there towards the bottom, but not really anything to say there. I have really no take there. Woodland, I feel a little bit better about. His ball striking stats are a lot more favorable than what you have there with the KH Lee. And then Hoffman, too. He was a lot better a month ago. You took a look a month ago. He's one of the best ball strikers that you had towards the bottom. He has fallen off a little bit over his last few starts. But yeah, I'd rank him Woodland, Hoffman, then TPC Lee out of those 3. And what was Scotty doing? He was quite literally carrying his child around the driving range and talking to players. So that's what I saw. He was putting before because he was over near the putting green at first. But yeah, all I saw was him just chilling, talking to some players. Glad Rory didn't steal my phone. Yeah, I saw that headline, by the way. Didn't see it in person, but that is some crazy stuff out there from Rory. Hey, Luke, you left a question under one of my posts on Patreon. Is that the best way to ask a question? It is, Jack, but I was on the golf course as of an hour ago. So if you threw that down there about an hour or two ago, I did not see it quite yet. But yes, that's a good spot to get an answer. Just not today, right? Because of the different circumstances that we have going on. So hopefully you understand that. What's going on, Jake? Also, thoughts on Xander? I'd say he's a good low-owned guy towards the top. He's one of the few players that you can see there with the ownership is a little bit lower owned than some of the guys around him. But there's a reason for that, right? He's rusty. You've only seen him for one event at this point. So if you're willing to eat that kind of risk, then you can use him. But, I can't answer that question for you, right? You've got to figure out whether you want to stomach that or not. What's going on, Brian? Hi, mate. Is Scotty sticking with that putting grip for this week? I believe so. I don't think he's going to change it up just, after one bad week. Now, if he goes out there, he struggles for the next, month or so, then I think you might see him change it up. Thoughts on Adam Hadwin? I've got him at like a 3.5 out of 10, Joshua. The form's not great. He's an okay course fit, I would say. I like the fact that it's not a super long, over-imposing course, but the form makes him a 3.5 out of 10 out of best. How do I feel about Sanjay this week? So the $9,700, he's a little bit overpriced, I would say, but that's also keeping the low ownership a lot lower than it probably should be. In fact, Daniel Berger, you could say, is also a little bit overpriced, but I've got him higher owned than what you have there with Sanjay M. Now, over the last year or so, right, Sanjay clearly the better player out of Sanjay M and Daniel Berger. Now, recent form, right, that heavily favors the Daniel Berger side. So if you're somebody that is a long-term player, long-term pedigree truther that likes to play guys to bounce back to their mean, then you're probably liking some Sanjay M this week. But, you got to answer that question. Is Gerard a good fit for this course? So I think that the Cognizant Classic PGA National is a pretty good course fit, pretty good comp course for what we have here. So I would say so. Did I deep dive Sanjay? So yes, just did Joker. So hopefully that answers your question. How do I feel about Siggy this week? I'm pleading the fifth on David. I saw some of them as Sig today that wasn't so great, but like I said, I'm playing the fifth and I'm not mentioning it. So maybe playing with caution. I'm using him in a few lineups, but I guess I'll just say it. I may or may not have seen him at the liquor store after the round. Ross says, is this the ho's birthday today? It was. Okay. I didn't know that. That's good to know. Birthday week narrative. I guess it never hurt anyone. Is Benny Ann coming on? Felt like it last week, right? You had that top 15 finish for him. I would say that he's a good buy early spot if you're trying to use him at lower ownership. What's going on? 3Bs is Underdog on the app. Offers a product called Streak for the Greatness. Yeah, I've seen those Streak ones and whatnot. Obviously, if you're going to do that, I can try to help you out, but not my main thing. I try and do like the 2-3 man slips for the most part. What's going on, Jonathan? He said, see any Willie Z or Carl Phillips? Did not see any of them either of them out there this week, so can't really say anything out there today. Thoughts on Hideki? Really good course history, past winner at this event, and lower owned than some of the guys around him, so perhaps a little bit of a leverage spot. Thoughts on Day? Not the best course fit, not the best form, but I guess he had the one spike week recently that you can lean into. He's like a 6 out of 10, I'd say. I like the recent performance, but that's about it. All good is under V6, by the way. What are you talking about? Okay. Okay. I'll look at your question later if that's what you're talking about. Where we leave off. Thoughts on Poston as a GPP play? I like it, Ryan. Iron play has been on point out for him recently. He's gaining over a half stroke per round out there with his irons, but he can't make a putt for his life. So, if he can find that would be great. Not the liquor store. Oh God, I really regret saying that now, guys, because it might not have been for him, right? It could have been for his family, family and friends in town. I'm playing them too. So full transparency, right? Don't think that means I said to fade him, but yeah, when I was grabbing the Tito's, that's in this drink right here, which by the way, I haven't even sipped yet. We got to get around to it. Yeah, he was there. He was there. I'm not going to lie about that. Cheers, Grayson, if you're drinking that whiskey you bought. What's going on, Kim? How much ownership am I seeing for Bobby Mack? Let me see, is he 8K plus? So yeah, 9.3%. Like you can see right there, you can see the rest of that range as well. They do a little bit of comparison. The wind forecast is changing overnight since Sunday taught you a lesson. For sure, Mark, but that's life. That's weather forecast for you. If you've made it this far in life and you haven't realized that the weathermen get stuff wrong, then I don't know what to tell you. That's it's kind of like life 101 right there, right? Weather forecasts aren't always accurate. So if that's news to you, I guess react to it, but I don't think that's news to anyone down here. I think everyone knew that. Nick says, with the variance here, should we play all the guys 20% or less? I don't think so, Nick. So let's talk about the ownership. And we'll talk about Phillips before we do so, I guess. Phillips, obviously coming in off the win, I think he's going to be over-owned, right? You see the win over there in alternate event. You want to play him in lineup, especially because he's super cheap. I think there's going to be better spots to play him, especially more wide open golf courses. We don't have to worry about the water. But let's talk about this game theory question that we had, because I like it a little bit more. So are we going to play just all the guys that are 20% minus? Like, no, because there are guys that are low owned for a reason. There are just dog shit plays that you have out there in this pool. And 20% and lower, right, in the 8K range means nothing. Like every single player here, right, is going to be 20% and lower. Really, this week, game theory matters, right? You have all that water in 17 of the 18 holes, but you've also had Scottie Scheffler win this 2 of the last 3 years. You have guys that have really good course history around here, like a Hideki Matsuyama that almost finishes top 10 every single time that he plays here. There are pieces of chalk, especially in that 9-10K range, that I don't think you need to worry about. And right, and I know your question there, Nick, may have been a little bit sarcastic, but the only guys that are going to be 20% owned plus are going to be towards the top end of the board, right? And are you going to play all of them? I mean, no, right? There's what 2 guys that are 20% plus. So if you played everyone 20% or lower, you'd be playing 142 players this week, right? And I know obviously that's not what you're going to do, but towards the top end of the board, I think if there's a player like Scottie Scheffler, for example, that you want to play at nearly 27%, I'm not against it, because you're going to have leverage plays down there towards the bottom end of the board, especially because the pricing goes the whole way down to this 5-6K range, because you have guys down here at like $5,000-$6,000 that are viable out there on a slate like this. Like maybe Doug Gim's not the best example, right? He's like 3.8% owned, but in this range, you've got a whole bunch of guys that are maybe 1.5% owned that are legit plays out there on a slate like this. So up top, even if you want to play guys like Colin, who you guys know he's a core play for me, right? I'm using him out there in lineups, who's still over 20% owned, you totally get away with that as long as you have guys down there towards the bottom that you're using for a little bit of differentiation. So I would say towards the top that the ownership isn't that big of a deal to me, especially at a golf course like this. And I know it seems counterintuitive with all that water out there, but there are guys here that just play well almost every single year. And I know you hear about all that variance out there with the chalk. That is mostly with guys that are a little bit cheaper, right? This like 8-9K chalk, I would be much more worried about going out there and playing it. And especially that 5-6K chalk down there towards the very bottom. Those guys I think are great fades, right? Go out there, fade all of those sort of players. But your highest owned guys down here in that 5-6K range are like 7-8% owned, right? So you're not just playing all the guys that are 20% and lower. So I would say the game theory on this sort of slate is especially interesting, just because I feel like the chalk towards the top is okay to play in a few cases. At least personally, I'm going to have a few of those players out there in my lineups. But as I move my way down the board, and this is a lot of times how I play anyways, but especially on a week like this, I'm leaning into the game theory more and more. And it's not to say that I don't have a few guys that have some ownership. Like I mentioned a Doug Gim. I'm also playing a Joel Damon down here towards the bottom. And by the way, Joel Damon, I have like 4 to 5% owned out there in GPP. So that is significantly higher owned than a lot of the other guys around him. Let's see who else is getting some ownership. So like, for example, an Aaron Rye, right? $7,100. I've got him over 10%. Just because I have some chalky pieces in my player pool doesn't mean that my lineup's going to be 4 or 5 pieces of chalk, right? It'll maybe be 1, 2, at most 3 of those players, right, out there in the same lineup, combined with 3 to 4 other guys, they're going to be like sub 5 to 7% owned, right? To go out there and offset a lot of that kind of ownership. So that's what I'll say about this game theory towards the top. Like, the guys that kind of stand out as pivots, it'd be guys like a Xander Schauffele, maybe a Patrick Cantlay there at about like 10%. Down here in this like 9K range, you got a bunch of guys that are lower owned. So that range, maybe it's not the best example, but like that doesn't mean that guys like Patrick Cantlay, Xander Schauffele this week are going to be the absolute nuts because they're a little bit lower owned than the guys around them. I'd say that there's a much better chance that these guys that are a little bit higher owned are the plays that you have to have this week, because they're the guys with course history. They're guys like JT have won here before, Colin Morikawa, a great course fit. Rory's won here before. Scotty's a back-to-back champion. You go out there, you play that game theory too much towards the top end of the board here. You're taking yourself off of all the guys that have actually proven themselves around a TPC Sawgrass. And, though it is a variant course, a lot of chalk comes here to die. Your course history is actually pretty sticky out there from year to year. You have guys that really kill it around this golf course. And I think that's a little bit of a misnomer that you guys may have seen around the industry, right? People saying that this is such a variant course, you have to fade all of that chalk. Maybe a little bit further down the board, but that is not so much the case, in my opinion, up there towards the very top of things. I'd say down here in this 8K range, what I want to point out with some of the ownership is that Sepp Straka is relatively chalky, right? We knew that heading into the week. It'd probably be the highest owned player over there in this range. But you have a lot of guys priced around him that I think are good plays over here for this week. So even though I am playing some Sepp Straka, right, that doesn't mean that I'm avoiding Will Zalatoris, who I think sets up extremely well for this course. In fact, you can see there, right, I took him for a top 5 bet. Though Jordan Spieth was struggling over there on the range, he's low owned enough there at 6.7% that maybe you use him for some leverage over there in lineups. Tom Kim, right? I know he was struggling on the greens, but Pendrith, McIntyre, right? There's a whole bunch of guys that I would say would be live over there in your lineups that you could use to offset some of that chalk towards the top. So maybe you do start with a chalkier Scotty Scheffler. Maybe your second man in is a Tommy Fleetwood or a Colin Morikawa. Maybe it isn't the best idea to use Sepp Straka as your third man in. I totally agree with that, right? Starting with a core of 3 guys, 15% plus, maybe not the best idea out there in that $5 or $25 GBP. But let's say that you started a Xander Schauffele. Your second man in was maybe Hideki or a Daniel Berger, right? A little bit lower owned than what you have there with a Tommy Fleetwood is your second man in. If your third man in that kind of lineup was going to be a Sepp Straka, then I don't have nearly that same kind of concern, right? You've got a lot of that leverage, or at least some leverage mixed in with those top 2 players, and you can afford to take somebody that's a little bit higher owned. Whereas if you started with, let's say, a Morikawa Fleetwood, who are both going to be over that 17% ownership mark, then maybe that's where you want to go to somebody like a Will Zalatoris or a Jordan Spieth that's going to give you a little bit more differentiation, a little bit more leverage against the rest of the field over here in that 8K range. So that's what I'll say about the ownership towards the top. This 9, 10, even 11K range up there towards the top, I don't know if ownership should be your main concern, at least in my opinion this week, right? And I could be wrong about it, right? It could be that all the leverage guys towards the top that end up smashing this week. But I would argue where I'm going to go out there and focus on it a little bit more is as I start to filter my way towards the bottom end of the board. Let me catch up on any questions. Then we're going to talk through some diamonds in the rough that I want to point out. We had a question for Premio. I said, what's up, bro? Any thoughts on Horschel? So other than the fact that he was grinding on the range today, I think that he fits this golf course quite well. He's a pretty good player out there on Bermuda grass, also accurate off the tee, but unfortunately was really grinding out there on his swing. Damon played better with alcohol, you're just saying. Oh, God. He hasn't been terrible lately, though, Nick. Just to point this out there with Damon, he's been hitting his irons well, so maybe the irons get better out there without alcohol, but I could see his putting getting worse because if you take a look at the stats lately, the putting has been really holding him back. You can see ball striking wise, gaining over a stroke and a half per round, short game wise, losing about a half a stroke per round. So let's see. Hopefully, sober wise for him, I think it's going to be really good for him. Just give him a month or so, right? He'll start making some putts. Any love for Chris Kirk? So I like him at these shorter Bermuda grass tracks. And I've got to say, I don't want that much steam to go behind my guy Chris, because part of the reason I like him out there in lineups is the fact that he's not going to be very popular. So yeah, I've got some love for him, but let's try and keep the steam a little bit low there. Am I liking Damon for a plus 135 matchup over Eckroat? Probably not. I think Eckroat is also a good course fit here. And, form-wise, Damon does have the edge over an Eckroat. But pedigree-wise, I'd say that Eckroat has the advantage over Joel Damon. So plus 135, you are getting plus money at least over there on that side. It's just that I understand why he's the underdog, right? Eckroat is, look at a 50 to 100 round sample size. He's the better player out of those two. How do I talk so fast for so long? Practice. I've been doing this for a long time. You said it's so hard to focus. You throw in a word like dog shit, it makes the word up again. You know what? I'm just going to ban you so that you don't have to worry about it going forward. If you can't follow me, man, I honestly don't even speak that fast. I can speak a whole lot faster. I know there's people that watch this at like 1.5x. You're just too slow to watch the channel in general. Like your brain just might be working at like 0.5x speed. And unfortunately, I can't fix that for you, right? If you're a dumb fuck, then you're a dumb fuck, right? I can't fix that for you. So I'll ban you. I'll send you on your way. And Darren, no one else has that problem. Never heard that one before. In fact, I've heard people say that I talk too slowly and don't get through things fast enough. I think you just need to stay off the drugs or whatever, dude, because I don't think I'm talking that fast. Thoughts on playing Akshay in a GPP? So he is relatively low owned. I don't have his ownership off the top of my head, Ryan, but he was missing a lot of 5 to 7 foot, 5 to 7 foot putts today. He was pulling a lot of them. It looks like he was pushing a few out there as well. So if you can get past that, then I think it's okay to go out there and play him, but just kind of know what you're getting yourself into. Like he's a ball striker. He fits the golf course well. But if he was losing 2-3 shots gained putting, that wouldn't surprise me either. He said Bridgman has been balling lately. Absolutely. He's a good fit. Don't know about the course fit as much, Prep, but the form is great. So I'm using him in lineups just because of that form. Bro has TikTok brain, can't focus for more than 15 seconds. For real, bro. Like it's kind of sad. And I've got to say, like, I feel like I talk slow, if anything. So if he thinks I'm talking fast, the guy might just be a complete brain dead dumb fuck. Like I have no other words for that. Do I like Pendy this week? So he's a long bomber, right? So like you normally play him at courses where it's like, okay, let's go and hit it a long way. But if you take a look at his track record at layup golf courses, so not so much the Cognizant, but like other tracks like RBC Heritage, TPC Southwind, he plays a lot better than you'd probably think. So I don't think he's out of play this week. He's not my favorite play, but you could use him. Shout out to the 1.5xers out there. That's what I'm saying, bro. There's people that 1.5x. I know for a fact that I do it on other channels, right, that talk faster than I do. That guy is just, like I said, play me in all the head-to-heads this week, by the way. That guy that I banned, please challenge me to as many as you would like. I promise you're plus EV to play against. Like, if you have a problem following a YouTube video, God forbid going out there and tracking ownership across 6 spots in a lineup. I'm sure that you're just an absolute hot mess. So, like I said, I know I banned you. You can't mention down there in chat. It's kind of unfortunate. I wish I didn't now. But just challenge me to some head-to-heads, bro. I'll gladly take your money. You'll help fund my trip over here. It's not cheap to stay in an Airbnb like this that's so close to the course, and not cheap to go out here and get tickets. So if you want to fund that, then please. And enter some head-to-heads against me. I'd be all for it. Thoughts on Victor Perez? TH, you're all over my sleeper plays this week that I don't want to talk about that much. I love him. I love him, though. He's a player that's from the DP World Tour, right? He's used to playing some of the shorter, more positional golf courses. I just hope the ownership's low, right? So I don't want to give him too much love there, TH, because part of the reason I like him is because he's sub 3% owned. But yeah, he's I think a good low-owned flyer play. We were talking about setting a max when you build on 20%, so you don't play anyone over 20%. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying there, Nick. You could do that, but I like some guys over 20%, so I won't be doing that myself. Bridgman does help with decent lineups. Yeah, I think there's a few guys down there that are usable, though. So not just Bridgman, but like Damon kind of stands out. Grayson Siggs down there towards the bottom. And we're actually going to talk about a few here in a second. You're going to go 100% single entry and 3 maxes. And yeah, are you talking about some of those like higher end guys? Okay, I could see that. Y'all listen on 1.5x. Where your 2xers at? Look at that, Zach Pursley. By the way, the high IQers down there in chat, right? That can listen to things in 1.5x, 2x volume. What's going on, Antonio? What's going on, TH? Do I think that Ben Griffin can beat Grazeman in round 1? Do I think he can? For sure, right? Do I know what's going to happen? Absolutely not. I'd say if I was trying to parse between the two and you gave me plus 100 on both players, you know, I'm taking the plus 100 on Ben Griffin because he's been playing better over his last 24 rounds. But I'm assuming that it's not plus 100 odds, right, between those two players. So that's kind of a tough one to give you the take on. Let's go. We're going to have a week for sure. Talk you off of Homa. Yeah, dude, he was hitting a bunch of golf balls today. So if you want your guy in form, don't play him. You'll watch it at 2x when you're watching live. Dude, that's what I'm talking about. That guy in chat. He might be off the fentanyl or something. I don't know, man. He might be off like the hard drugs at this point. Ross says, yeah, for real, Sig getting the min price. Where's the respect? Yeah, there's a few guys we're going to talk about. In fact, Sig might be one of the ones that we're going to talk out. What's going on? Ryan said Clark, Sepp, Shane, and Xander to make the cut. Ooh, so the make the cut parlays this week, Ryan, are really tough for me just because of some of the variance with the water. I've got to say, though, I do like Sep to make the cut. I do like Shane Lowry as well. They're both accurate drivers. So out of those four, I'm kind of okay with those two. But, entering all four together, I'm not sure if that's my favorite. Thoughts on Siwoo Kim? Great course history. Also really good iron play heading in. And look at that. Joe Mama's at 2.5x speed. Like I said, what's that guy's name again? All right, I banned him. I think it like hides his name or whatever. Please send me all the head-to-heads you want. Like it's free money if it's actually that much of an issue for you. Let's talk about some of these value plays down towards the bottom. So first up, we're going to be JJ Spawn here at $6,700. And if you've been following PGA DFS for the last few months, I mean, JJ Spawn's been an absolute baller. I mean, approach play has been on point for the last 24, even last 36 rounds. And his off the tee play has been there as well. So I thought that he was going to be a lot higher owned than what we actually got here. But compared to some of the guys around him, he's average to below average ownership here in the top end of the 6K range. So you can see the form there, right? Gaining about a stroke per round. Course history really isn't anything to write home about out there for JJ Spawn, but he does play well those positional sort of golf courses, which is kind of what we have here at the Players, right? It's not like a RBC Heritage type of short or even like a TPC Southwind, but it's closer to that side of the spectrum than what it is over there at a course like, let's say, the Farmers, right? That's like 7,800 yards. So yeah, I can see myself playing some JJ Spawn to get a little bit different there. I've also got some Nikolai Højgaard over there in my lineups, right? I know we had a question about the Højgaard twins a little bit earlier, but you can see him there at just 3.2% ownership, and he's gaining over a stroke per round out there with his iron play. So, comparatively over here towards the top end of that 5K range, he's one of the best iron players that we have in this field. And then the last play I wanted to point out here, and of course, right, some of the other plays I have on there, you guys can find in my DFS preview that I did a little bit earlier this week. But it's Jesper Svensson here at $5,200. And Jesper is the kind of player that I thought was a little bit overrated like a week or so ago, right? When he was close to 10% ownership, also like $7,500, because he didn't have the best start last, time out or two. He's only $5,200. He's only down here at 1% ownership down here towards the bottom. And, there are a few other guys here like Joel Damon that I'm going to be playing as well. I already mentioned a few others as well down here towards the bottom end of the 5K range. But Jesper could be $7,500 in a lot of the PGA Tour events this year. And he's $5,200. So I would argue that getting to these like Scotty Schefflers, your top end guys like a Rory, Colin Morikawa, Abear, JT, right there at $10,100, it's just so much easier than most weeks that it's going to be a lot easier to get leverage on some of these players than what you normally have, because, playing 60% of a Scotty, especially if you want to mix in a lot of other players in this range, would normally be pretty hard to do. But because we have so many viable guys down here towards the bottom, I'm not going to have as much trouble getting leverage towards the field. So I'm being pretty aggressive towards the top end of the board, right? The guys I'm playing up here that are chalk, like Scotty Scheffler, I'm playing this week, right? You can probably tell at this point that I'm using him out there in lineups. Like, I'm going to be pretty aggressive with them. I'm going to use them in at least 50% of my lineups, which is getting close, if not over that 2x leverage mark that a lot of people are looking for. So I like the lineup construction that we have out there this week. And towards the bottom, it's not even so much like skill set that gets me on guys like a Højgaard or a Jesper Svensson down here towards the bottom. It's pedigree, right? Like, these guys are just much better players than what some of the other guys are around them. Then I'm going to go out there and use them in some lineups. So that's the idea over there with my player pool this week. I'd say that there's a lot more pivots down here towards the bottom end of the board out there in my lineups than usual. So, of course, guys, for all the projections that you see here, completely uncensored, a lot of this is blacked out, of course, because I have it on my Patreon page. Make sure to check out the link in the description of the video to go out there and join the Patreon for my entire player pool. And this week, I think I'm close to like 30, maybe like give or take 1 or 2 players out there in either direction, out there in my 150 max pool. Not only do you get that, right, every single player I'm using out there in lineups, but you also get my ownership projections that you can see right there, my modeling out there for every single player. You've got the recent form metrics, event history, also the model weightings over here on the right side to go out there and use for your process. So make sure to check that out if you guys haven't already, to go out there and supplement all the content that we have here. Let me see if there's any last second player poll questions before we move on out there to lineup construction, because what we're going to do is we're going to look at some of the contests that we have available. Also, a few of the different ways that you can build lineups out there for this week, a few of the strategies and going out there and building GPP lineups. Then we're going to round it off with some of that underdog and price pick stuff as well. Where do we leave off? It's plus 140. You don't think Eric Cole will even compete with those two, so it's more of a one-on-one. So yeah, it's a 3-ball you're saying between those guys. I don't know if that's good enough odds for me, Jack. So, if you asked my take on whether I thought it was a really good bet, I'd probably stay away from it. Let me get a Denny McCarthy take. This is the best Denny that I've seen. It's the best approach to Denny that we've seen for quite some time. So I agree with you on that, Ross. I actually gave my take a little bit earlier, probably before he got in here, but I think that he's a really good iron play heading into this event, right? Really good form and whatnot, but he's got to start to make more putts. Thoughts on Connors this week? Good form, decent course fit, I'd say, but he could not make a putt for his life today. Aubert, Decky, and JT should be a fun group to follow. I'm sure I'll be following them for at least a little bit over the next few days. What am I doing with Cantor? I'm not playing him, but I would say that he's a decent form play if you're looking at the DP World Tour stuff. But it's DP World Tour form as opposed to the PGA Tour, so a lot easier to go out there and gain. Tyler's going to be out there this weekend. Okay, I'll buy you a beer, Tyler. Come say hi. What's going on? Nick says, is Nick Taylor too chalky? He's too chalky for me. I don't think he's the best course fit here, so I'm not using him. But yeah, also a little bit higher owned. Of course, Jack. How chalky is Michael Kim going to be? Pricing is wild. The pricing came out before the end of last week, so it looks really off out there on Michael Kim. I've got him at like 8-9%, so getting a lot more steam than the guys around him, Paul. But it's not like he's like 20% owned, right? So like, if you're going to use him in 15 to 20% of lineups, you can get some leverage there. So he's not unusable, but you've got to know ahead of time that you're going to have to take him in a healthy amount of laps to get that leverage. Let me bring up Draftkings. We're going to talk through some of those contests out there before we talk through a lineup or two. And like I said, any last second questions you have for DFS, go ahead and hit me up right now. Also, smash that like button if you guys haven't already, and subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss anything to come, because I'm sure that hater down in chat that was talking about me talking too fast probably disliked the video. So how about we ratio his ass out here? Just get it to like 100 or 200 likes or something like that, so that his little dislike, his little pity dislike because he's a little bitch, doesn't mean anything, right? It'll get washed away essentially by all you guys showing the love out here in the video. But let's look at some of the contests that we still have available, which, rounds 2 through 4 showdown usually have a lot more to look at here, but a lot of the contests have started to fill. It does look like the Millie Maker is having some trouble filling, but with only about 30,000 spots left to fill, I would expect this to fill out there in the next 12 hours. But if you take a look at some of the other contests they have available, like they have this big $4,444 contest that only has 6 spots left. So that is for sure going to go out there and fill before lock. Same thing with this $200 single entry, right? That's not going to have an issue filling. So if you're going to go out here and get into some of these contests, you probably want to do it now. Like even this drive the green that I'm in, this 100K to first contest here, right? You can see over here, right? I've maxed it out already. It's only got about 14,000 spots remaining. So I would say they did a pretty good job with sizing these contests. Like they're not filled 12 hours before lock. Like they did a decent enough job out there with sizing them that they can have a good enough payout for the kind of demand that we have. But you've got a lot of single entries down here. Like you've got this 10K $100 that you have right there. This $30 single entry right here. Actually, this is a smaller drive the green, not a single entry that you have down here for a $30,000 contest. They're treating it like a major championship, which you love to see out here with this sort of contest. And hopefully they can keep that going out there for rounds 2 through 4 showdown. Now, in terms of your lineup construction, I don't see a massive edge out there with the weather. So I'm not doing anything crazy when it comes to my lineup construction. I'm more so just trying to make sure that I have enough differentiation in my lineups to move up in GPPs when I get things right. So just to show you kind of the thought process when it comes to building the big $5, big $25 GPP, I'm going to use some chalk towards the top. So let's throw in a Scotty Scheffler. Let's use Tommy Fleetwood as our second man in. That way, we're being pretty aggressive with our ownership up top, and we really have to force our hand with our last 3-4 spots. So that puts us at 68.5 remaining for our last 4 spots. I'm going to throw in somebody here that still has some ownership here in this 7K range, but not somebody that I would consider chalk either. So right, we're avoiding guys like Nick Taylor that are maybe a little bit more popular. And let's throw in Denny McCarthy, right? We mentioned all the good things about his approach stats. He's also going to be a little bit lower owned. Towards the top end of the 6K range, maybe bottom end of the 7s is where we can go for our next man in. Let's throw in Akshay Bhatia here, right? Also, pretty solid play, especially when it comes to his form and his ball striking heading in. but not going to be chalk over there at $7,000. So, even though we have a popular Scotty, a popular Tommy Fleetwood mixed in, you've got two guys that should be sub 7% owned over there with Denny and Akshay. And then for our last two players here, right, as long as we're somewhat getting different to the field, I'm going to feel totally fine about our lineup construction here because we're going to have 3-4 players that we're actively getting different to the field with. So let's throw in a JJ Spawn there at $6,700. And then for our last man in, we do have that $6,000, right? Can't go through all 6 out there for lineup construction just because that's against the DraftKings terms of service. But like, even if you use the chalkiest option at $6,000, right, spend all of your salary with, let's say, a Laurie Cantor there, you'd probably get away with it over there in that large field GPP because you have 3 guys there that are for sure sub 10%. Now, if you went the Scotty Fleetwood towards the top, and then maybe rather than taking a Denny McCarthy in this range, let's say you were a little bit chalkier and went with, like, let's say a Corey Connors, maybe you were a little bit chalkier, and yeah, I guess Corey would be the best example up there towards the top end of the 7Ks. He's the most popular player that we have at that portion of the board. If you went with the Corey Connors there, now, you only really have 2 pivots in this lineup, right? And Akshay Bhatia, JJ Spawn, maybe you don't want to use a super chalky guy as your last man in. Now, of the guys that are $5,800, right, none of them are mega chalky down at this portion of the board. But let's assume that there was a guy here at $5,800 that was, like, let's say 10-15% owned. Then maybe you don't want to go out there and round off your sort of lineup over here with the 4th piece of chalk, right? That would be what I would be trying to avoid over there in lineups. Whereas, if you took somebody that was a little bit lower owned, let's say, you'd still feel pretty good about this lineup over there in that big $5 or $25 GPP. So, when you're building lineups, it's more so about balancing that ownership, balancing that game theory, as I mentioned before, and making sure that when you have your core hit of 3-4 players, that you're actually up there towards the top end of the board and you're not sharing them out there with 20-25% of the field. So that's really the main thing when it comes to the lineup construction. It's not so much weather. It's not so much even, Sunday showdown, right, where we're trying to prioritize some of the guys towards the top end of the board. It's player guys. Make sure you have some loans guys out there in lineups. If you're hand building, right, you can do it kind of like we just did together. But if you're out there on an optimizer, you can set a max product ownership, a max cumulative ownership. There's a bunch of different ways you can force in some of that differentiation. All stuff that I would consider over there for this week. Let me see if there's any last second stuff. Let's see. One and done question from Tanner. Decky, Aubert, personally leaning towards Decky or Luddy. So you also have X on there as well. So yeah, I'd probably go with Hideki out of those 3 just because he has the best course history. And I think he'll be a little bit lower owned than some of those other 2 as well. So I'd go with him. What's going on, Mason? He said, don't know if you're too late, but thoughts on Ryan Henley under 2.5 bogeys. I think that the Rye one makes quite a bit of sense. I personally really like the Hideki Matsuyama under 2.5 bogeys, and you got him for plus money over there in Bet365. Let me know what they have for Hideki. If he's anywhere close to plus money, maybe like plus 100, I would consider that one as well, Mason. But let's talk about the prop side now. So I mentioned, right, that was going to be it for DFS. So if you're just here for that, appreciate you guys stopping by as per usual. One thing I need you to guys do is to go ahead and smash that like button if you guys haven't already. And also rounds 2 through 4 showdown, we'll be doing that over there on the Ship It Nation YouTube channel. So make sure you guys stay tuned for all of that over the weekend, as well as all the prop and betting content over there on my YouTube channel after we're live over there on Ship It. But out there for round 1, if you guys haven't already seen my article over there on the Bet the Number channel, I think that the conditions for round 1 are going to be pretty similar to what we had last year. So, around like a 4, maybe 4.1 birdie average. Bogey average probably staying in that 3.1, maybe 3.2 range. And even this fairway or green regulation average, I don't think is going to change very much. So the slip that I ended up taking over here for round number 1 was an over on Joel Damon birdies. So just expecting him to match the field average from last year of about 4 birdies. And then it was an over on Aldrich Potgieter strokes. Now, they took Potgieter off the board, so I'll go ahead and give you guys a little bit of a replacement play for that one. And that's going to be this over on Hideki Matsuyama pars. So this would be like an under on 2.5 bogeys or worse, right over there on that sort of book. But Hideki is minus 130 for his under at 2.5 bogeys or worse, but he's also a player with elite tier course history. In fact, over his last 12 measured rounds, he's covered this in 8 of his 12 rounds. So that's a 67% conversion rate right out there towards the over out here in pars or better at a golf course that should be playing easy tomorrow morning, right? 8:24 a.m. tee time. So be going off when conditions are calm out there in the morning, and also pretty receptive over there for Thursday. So I think conditions are playing into his advantage, course history playing into his advantage, and both of these golf early. So not just Hideki over there for pars or better, but Joel Damon has a 7:51 tee time. So you're talking about two guys that have the better side of things, I would say, and that have good course history. And by the way, Joel Damon over here with this birdie prop, he's covered this in 10 of his last 12 rounds. So you're talking about somebody that in both cases, right, that has an elite tier hit rate out there on these sort of props, and that, you know, conditions wise, if anything, has an easier day, right, than what we're usually used to seeing around a TPC Sawgrass. So that's it for the prop side as well, right? Just like we have over there for DFS, my entire player pool is posted over there on my Patreon page, as well as every single slip that I'm entering over there for round number 1. There's 2 slips I've already gone with over here in Prize Picks out there for Thursday. But tonight, as I go through some of the boards, I'm going to dinner over here in about 30 minutes. So I'm sitting there at dinner, right? I'll be taking a look at this Underdog Prize Picks board, maybe trying to find a little bit of stuff to go out there and add out there to the table, but make sure to join the Patreon page for all of that as well. As soon as I enter slips over there on either site, I post those over there for my members, not only with all the different pieces of exposure I'm entering, as well as the little different scoring averages and weather reports out there for all these different events that you see. Or obviously Players Championship is something we went through together, but we also got the Live Singapore stuff that we have out here for Friday through Sunday. Make sure to check out the Patreon for all of that. But that's all I've got, guys. I'm hitting the end of my window here. I've only got 30 minutes to get over here to dinner. I've got to get changed. I've got to get freshened up here, get out to dinner and whatnot. Let me see if there's any last second questions down there, chat. So if you have anything, now's the time to go ahead and fire it down in chats. So I'll miss you guys down there. But if not, best of luck with all the exposure that you guys are going with, whether it's in large field GBPs. Hopefully we can take something down, or over there on the prop side for Underdog and Prize Picks. I want it to be a very solid weekend out there for everyone in this video, and best of luck out there with everything you're doing. Let's see where we left off. So I think we already did that one. Okay. Did I use Razorman, maybe you're asking about, out there for PGA? I don't believe so, if you're asking about Razorman. Any Thigala in my pool? I don't remember off the top of my head, to be frank with you, TH, but I believe so. Hideki is plus 110 for the under at 2.5. That's not the case, Mason. So I guess that's over there on Bet365. On Caesars William Hill, which is a much sharper book, he is minus 130 out there in that direction. So if you can get plus 110, I would bet that for sure. Michael says, thanks, of course. And same thing with Emma and Holla. I appreciate the kind words down there in chat. That's all I've got, guys. Appreciate you guys stopping by, showing all the love that you guys do. If you haven't already smashed that like button, you're an absolute jabroni. Go ahead and do so. Smash that subscribe button as well, so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. And tomorrow evening, I believe it'll be around 7 p.m. Eastern. I may have to push it back just a little bit so I can get back into the condo here and get ready for the live stream on Ship It. But we're doing the round 2 showdown stream over there tomorrow night. Round 2 prop stream and betting stream a little bit afterwards. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to this event in general and everything to come. And of course, best of luck with everything that you guys are doing.